This is for the swivel joint. You can see I've cleaned the hub off now, and the top swivel is actually quite solid still. Bottom swivel. The top one, however, you can see someone's had at it, by the look of it, with a chisel, maybe an air hammer, trying to tighten up the top, and when you hold it, the ball joint just wobbles everywhere, and that shouldn't move. It should be solid like the top one is. So you see, dangles down, sticks straight out. It's amazing. Every time I talk, my dogs start barking. Okay, I'm going to have to invest in a tripod for it, but hopefully you can see I have a fairly blunted screwdriver that I've used for years as a chisel. Tap down the retaining ring. It should be pinned up in several. Now you can see the damage around the top from someone trying to do it without the proper tools, and the ball joint is actually catching on these, so it can't. It actually doesn't do a clean circle. It keeps banging onto the edges of there. Okay, to take it off, you need a 1.5 inch spanner, which I have just got, and it shouldn't be that tight. It should be tighter than that, but you just undo it. I could do a pipe wrench on this one because it doesn't really matter. Take it off, and whoever did this before has really done a number on it. There's the ball joint part of it, the nut, the shim that sits under the nut, and there should be some shims on here, and there they are. And those shims I will pull off now, then I'll clean the whole lot and line them up and show you what that looks like. Remember that once you've got the ball out and the shims off, that the lock tab is held in place by the grease nipple, but you should remove the grease nipple anyway and clean out the passages because it's probably clogged up to hell and gone by now. The grease nipple on the side there is a 5/16. Has a short focal length, this camera, and you just undo it. Sorry, I'm holding it and doing it, and lift it off, and that grease feeds all the way through into the base of there, so you need to clean it out. I use a syringe, but you can clean it out with whatever you want, maybe one of those spray cans with a little straw on the front, and then as it goes in, it hits the bottom of there and gets distributed, and it goes straight through the hole onto the bottom of the actual ball itself, and the ball itself will be sitting there on top of that. So that's what greases it up, and then the whole lot is held in by the cover. The nut is probably savable. I do have a new kit, but that can be cleaned up with a file. It's not on a load-bearing surface. The load-bearing surface on the inside looks fine, and I pulled 2 full-size shims out of it, and probably, we'll have to see. We'll see how worn it is. I might have to replace it, or possibly I can just grind it all together again. Okay, when you get your spares, it's a QSK 96S. I believe the 96 has both sides. The 96S only has one side. And what you should get is new locking tabs, new pins, new nuts, the little seats that the ball joints sit on. There's a spring in the top one, as I remember, and not the bottom one though. A handful of shims, but never ever throw away your old shims when you do it. Your new nuts and a lock tab and the special bolt for the top that sits on the bump stop. The old original Quinton Hazel ones are pretty good, but if you want to, you can just drop the ball in the joint and then put some valve grinding paste on there and move it around. There's no way I can do this and hold this, but move it around and just make sure that you end up with a shiny silver surface on both, so that you know it's a nice clean seat. The QHs I've never had a problem with, but some of them you can. Generally speaking, even though I have the new kit, I find that you can very often save the old. With this one here, I'm going to try and just clean up those faces. The bearing surface on the inside is clean, but clean up these faces on the outside so the ball can actually slide properly. I've taken out all of the shims and I'm going to measure the gap just there between the work face and the nut and see what that is. And if it's less than the locking washer, then we're fine and we can actually just clean up the old one and use it again. The big thing is just to keep taking out shims until it's nice and tight. There's no damage on this, so we're good to go on that. Even the rubber is still intact and nice. So, next step. Okay, I've tweaked this down until it's tight. I cannot move that pin with my fingers. Grab my feeler gauge and you put them into that gap there. Now, I've already done it, so it looks like I'm clever, but you need to push it all the way back so that you can feel the threads at the back. In places, if you can't get all the way to the back, then you have to move it out a little bit, but I can get all the way in, all the way around, and I'm looking at a 27 and a 28, which gives me 55 thou. With the using the old one, the old locking tab, the thickness of the tab is just on 40 thou. I have 55 thou, so I need a 15 thou shim under that, and we should be good to go once I clean it up. Okay, so even though I've got a new kit, I like trying to keep the original stuff as much as I can. So I have cleaned up the outer surface. Sorry, had to shout at my dog. Cleaned up the outer surface of the nut so that the rubber rides on it quite comfortably, and then cleaned up the inner surface so that the ball can swivel all the way around. If of course the actual bearing surface that the ball runs on is damaged, you have to use a new nut. I then put I've cleaned it out, pulled a piece of wire through it, the grease channel, but now I've put everything is out of the ball joint, but I've put the grease nipple back in, and I'm going to hook up a grease gun and just pump some grease through that now. Hopefully you can see this okay. I mean, it's just putting grease through a grease nipple, but... and there it goes. So now we know those channels are all clean and we are good to go to put it all back together again. Okay, and seeing as how I knew what I was doing and I did all the measurements, I know that I need to put the original slip ring back on, use the grease nipple to secure it. I need 15 thou of shims, which I've already measured and pulled out of the new kit. I need the seat, the ball joint, and my cleaned up nut. And now when I put those together, and I'm doing this in front of the camera, so I've got to be damn careful, except of course there's no grease. Wait, turning the camera off. Okay, being super brave again. I haven't tested it, I've greased it up a little. Screwing it back down. And in theory, it's still quite loose, but a hell of a lot tighter than it was. But now I just pinch it down on the shims, and damn, I have too many. Okay, probably closer to 13th. Now I will pull one out. Okay, now I know why in cooking shows they always say we have one ready prepared for you. It's in, it's tweaked up. I only needed 12 thou, and the ball is very difficult to move, but it moves quite freely over the whole distance. I will put more grease in, which you squeeze in from the bottom through here to make sure that there's grease all the way down. And we should be good. And it's coming out of the top corner, so we should be good to go. Put the old rubber boot back on that because that's undamaged. Tap up the edges of this on 3 or 4 spots, and we are good to go. Got it done and ready to run. I hope that's some help, guys. Bye now.